And today, we are deep diving into a text that I think is just foundational. It's a political warning, a book that gets pushed aside as, simple high school homework.
George Orwell's Animal Farm.
Exactly. And it's time to treat this book with the gravity it really deserves. We're not just approaching this as a historical allegory about the Soviet Union, which is, that's how most of us were taught it.
Right. That's the standard date.
Instead, we're using the sources to decode it as something far more vital. A 5-step playbook for modern manipulation. A blueprint for systemic injustice that is being executed, well, in real time, globally, right now.
That's the hook we need. So the core concept here is that this short, deceptively simple story about farm animals is actually a brutal, timeless manual.
A manual for understanding how revolution is betrayed and how power, regardless of its ideology, inevitably corrupts.
So for the listener who hasn't touched this book since they were a teenager, why should they treat it as an essential piece of political education today?
Because it just strips away all the noise. Orwell shows you the bare mechanics of tyranny.
He made it simple.
So simple. He demonstrates that whether the leaders are wearing a crown, carrying a flag, or, promising a utopia, the means by which they keep the masses loyal, confused, and overworked they're identical.
So you could apply this to almost anything.
You can analyze any modern political crisis, any corporate scandal, any misinformation campaign, and you will find Squealer, you'll find Napoleon, and you'll find the mechanisms laid out on Manor Farm right at its core. It's an urgent warning about the corruption of language and really the necessity of independent thought.
So we're treating this not as historical fiction, but as an enduring text on political psychology, on the nature of control itself.
Absolutely. Orwell was not just reacting to history, he was anticipating the future. He fundamentally understood that the moment you can control what people say, and maybe more importantly, control what people remember, you have achieved absolute and irreversible power.
To understand the genesis of that chilling insight, we have to start with the man who wrote it. So let's look at the biographical context that forged this novel. Who was the man who saw this coming?
Well, the man was born Eric Arthur Blair back in 1903, and the irony of his life is where we find the foundation of his radical critique.
How so?
Here was a man educated at Eton College, the absolute pinnacle of British aristocratic learning. He was destined for the very heart of the empire he would later dedicate his life to dismantling.
So his whole life was a rebellion against his own background.
A conscious rebellion against the privilege he was born into, yes.
That kind of journey, from an elite establishment member to a fierce anti-establishment critic, it requires some kind of massive crisis of conscience. Where did that shift begin for him?
It began with his time in Burma. For 5 years, he served as an officer in the imperial police. He was literally a paid representative of colonial rule. He was the enforcer of the system.
And the sources say this experience was just devastating for him.
Utterly. He saw firsthand the cruelty and hypocrisy required to maintain systemic power, and he realized that the system dehumanizes not just those it oppresses, but the oppressors as well.
He described having to wear a mask, didn't he?
Exactly. He felt forced to maintain this facade of authority and power, and he wrote that he began to feel his face, his true moral self growing to fit that mask.
Wow.
The psychological cost of participating in that kind of systemic injustice became the driving force for his writing. When he left Burma, he wasn't just leaving a job. He was abandoning an entire way of life and seeking a form of justice that was, true and unfiltered.
And he wasn't content to just write about the exploited. He actually chose to live among them, that's a rare commitment for a writer of his stature.
He deliberately rejected privilege. Upon his return to Europe, he adopted the pen name George Orwell and just plunged himself into the lives of the destitute.
He wasn't just an observer.
No, not at all. He worked as a tramp, a vagrant, a dishwasher in Europe, and he documented it all in Down and Out in Paris and London. He wasn't conducting research from a distance. He was truly, as we noted, an immigrant in the land of the destitute.
So he learned the language firsthand.
The language of hunger, of bureaucracy, and of despair. And this gave his later political critiques this unshakable moral authority, because he knew exactly what it felt like to be disposable to the system.
So if Burma gave him the empathy for the oppressed, then the Spanish Civil War, that gave him the bitter template for Animal Farm. This is where the utopian vision meets the betrayal.
That is the ultimate fire that forged this book. In 1936, Orwell went to Spain, and he wasn't a journalist or a tourist. He went to fight fascism.
He was a believer.
He was a true believer. He joined a socialist militia, seeking the pure, egalitarian society he believed was possible, a world where the working class truly held power. This initial period, especially in places like revolutionary Barcelona, that was his idealistic moment. It was the equivalent of the animals driving Mr. Jones off the farm.
But the dream quickly turned into the exact nightmare he was trying to escape.
The idealism was just annihilated by political reality. He witnessed the revolution being ruthlessly betrayed from within, and this betrayal came from the Soviet-backed communist factions who were prioritizing Stalin's geopolitical power over the genuinely revolutionary fervor of the local militias.
So Stalin's strategy was just to purge any rivals.
Even those supposedly on his side.
So the betrayal wasn't coming from the external fascists, but from the supposed comrades.
Precisely. Orwell saw this campaign of brutal paranoia unfold. Communist-controlled newspapers started printing utterly outrageous, unbelievable lies, like an early draft of Squealer's rhetoric about his friends and allies.
He saw people he knew to be honorable fighters, suddenly labeled as fascists, spies, or traitors.
People were just disappearing.
And the personal cost for him was devastating.
It was nearly fatal. He was shot in the throat by a sniper, and while he was recovering, the Stalinist purge machinery turned on him. He and his wife were declared enemies of the state by the very communists they had come to support. They had to flee Spain for their lives, dodging secret police.
That experience fundamentally altered his outlook, didn't it? It transformed him from a critic of imperialism into a critic of all unchecked power, regardless of its revolutionary packaging.
His conclusion was searingly simple. A revolution without inherent freedom and fundamental decency is merely a transaction. It's just a change of masters. He realized the most pressing danger wasn't the old ruling class, but the revolutionary idealists who, once empowered, adopted the very tactics of control they had vowed to abolish.
And his mission became clear.
His singular, consuming mission became exposing the myth of the Soviet Union as a workers' paradise and revealing it for what it was: a brutal dictatorship built on organized deception. Animal Farm was the strategic vessel for that truth, using the simplicity of a fable to deliver a complex, dangerous message.
A message so dangerous, in fact, that it was almost completely silenced when it was most needed.
Yeah.
Which brings us to the astonishing historical context and the story of the book's initial sabotage.
The problem, as we noted, was one of terrible timing. Orwell finished the manuscript in 1943, right in the heart of World War II.
Right, and geopolitically, the Soviet Union, led by Joseph Stalin, was an absolutely vital ally for the West against Nazi Germany.
Public opinion, driven by wartime propaganda, celebrated Stalin as Uncle Joe, the heroic leader.
So the governments in London and Washington needed that myth of Uncle Joe to hold.
Yeah.
Making a searing satire about his tyranny was, it was virtually an act of political sabotage.
Exactly. Orwell found himself facing this institutional wall of rejection. He submitted his manuscript to several prominent publishing houses, only to have it refused repeatedly. The consensus was clear. Publishing a book that exposed Stalin as a paranoid murderer would damage the fragile alliance and undermine the war effort.
And this wasn't just commercial nervousness, was it? Our sources reveal there was active institutionalized suppression going on.
Oh, there's compelling evidence of suppression. One highly influential publisher, T.S. Eliot, working at Faber, he famously rejected it, arguing that its anti-Soviet stance was ill-timed.
And there's an even more chilling story.
More chillingly, yeah, we know of a prominent, well-connected publisher who actively sabotaged the book. This person was later revealed to be a Soviet agent reporting directly to Moscow. They dismissed the manuscript as a dangerous piece of work, confirming that the paranoia Orwell wrote about in Spain was now operating within the heart of the British cultural establishment.
It's a literal moment of life, imitating art. The spy mechanism trying to suppress the truth.
And it wasn't just the publishing world. The British Ministry of Information, the government body responsible for wartime propaganda and censorship, formally advised against its publication.
So he was confronting the entire political and military establishment, telling a truth that was just strategically inconvenient.
And that context makes the book hit so much harder. You realize how hard it is to speak truth to power when power is desperate to maintain a narrative?
So why did Orwell, facing this unified institutional rejection, persist? If the book was so timely about WWII, why did he insist it was a timeless warning?
Because he understood the patterns. He knew that the specific events of the 1940s would fade, but the fundamental mechanisms of corruption he captured, The manipulation of history, the use of scapegoats, the corruption of language, he knew they were universal.
He saw the blueprint.
He realized the story wasn't just a historical footnote about a distant revolution. It was a blueprint for how all power, once unchecked, acts. He knew the warning would resonate with every future generation facing information warfare and political manipulation.
That sets the stage beautifully. Let's jump into the book itself. We need to walk through the narrative structure clearly to understand the necessary conditions for the betrayal to occur.
Okay, so we'll start with the non-spoiler overview. The setting is Manor Farm, which is basically a microcosm of an oppressive, unequal society.
Run by the negligent, drunken human owner, Mr. Jones.
Right, and the animals are suffering, overworked, exploited. It's a clear allegory for the exploited proletariat under an uncaring ruling class.
And the moment of revolutionary clarity comes from the respected elder, Old Major.
Old Major, who functions as this combined Marx and Lenin figure, delivers his last prophetic speech. And this speech is a revolutionary masterpiece. He isolates the single enemy, man.
Man consumes without producing.
Exactly. Man is the source of all their misery, and he lays out the foundational ideology of animalism, the vision of a utopian future based on equality, free from the harness and the whip.
And he also provides the emotional fuel for the revolution.
That fuel is the anthem, Beasts of England. It's an infectious, unifying song that speaks of hope, abundance, and brotherly love. Old Major dies 3 nights later, but the seed of revolution is planted.
Now, the administration falls to the most intelligent animals, the pigs, and right away we see this internal political split emerge.
Yes, the 2 rivals who represent 2 distinct types of revolutionary leadership, Snowball and Napoleon. Snowball is the brilliant intellectual, the eloquent speaker, the true idealist. He focuses on education, committees, organizing the revolution.
And Napoleon.
Napoleon, by contrast, is taciturn, cunning, and interested only in force and the consolidation of power. He sees debate as a weakness.
The rebellion itself is a chaotic, pure moment of liberation, though.
It's a spontaneous burst of freedom. Jones forgets to feed them, they break into the store shed, and when Jones and his men try to drive them back with whips, the animals just erupt in fury and drive the humans off the farm.
And they destroy the symbols of slavery.
Whips, chains, nose rings, all of it. They rename the place Animal Farm.
And their new constitution, painted at the barn wall, is the blueprint for their utopia.
Snowball paints the 7 commandments, the foundation of animalism. And these are laws of absolute purity. No animal shall wear clothes, drink alcohol, sleep in a bed, kill any other animal. And the ultimate defining law of the entire enterprise. All animals are equal.
Okay, now we have to enter the spoiler section, which documents the swift and chilling sequence of betrayals that turn Animal Farm into the very thing it rebelled against.
And the destruction begins almost instantly. Immediately following this triumphant rebellion, the cows need milking. The animals look at the pails of milk, wondering what to do with them, an early sign of the spoils of victory.
And Napoleon steps in.
Napoleon steps in front of the pails and yells, "Never mind the milk, comrades, the harvest is more important." He distracts them, sends them off to the fields.
So when the animals return that evening,
Milk is gone.
the first crack. It's an invisible crime. No one saw him take it.
It is the moment privilege is quietly claimed by the new ruling class. And this is quickly followed by the declaration that the apples, the choicest prop, will also be reserved exclusively for the pigs.
And this visible act of inequality sparks unrest.
Which is the crucial moment where the regime deploys its chief strategic weapon, Squealer.
The master manipulator.
Yeah.
The original spin doctor, whose job is to turn privilege into necessity.
Squealer is dispatched to manage the narrative. He's small, fat, with twinkling eyes, and has a voice so persuasive he can literally turn black into white. He argues that the pigs are brain workers and that the milk and apples are absolutely necessary for their intellectual well-being to prevent a collapse of management.
This is a crucial early tactic that sets the tone for future oppression, framing luxury as a sacrifice.
Absolutely. Squealer says, "It is for your sake that we eat those apples. We pigs actually dislike them. It is a burdensome sacrifice we make for your welfare." Their consumption is recast as selflessness.
And then comes the hammer blow.
The ultimate fear tactic that just shuts down all critical thinking. Do you know what would happen if we pigs failed in our duty? Jones would come back. Surely none of you wants Jones back.
And the fear of the external defeated enemy justifies the internal growing corruption. The animals, terrified of returning to their previous bondage, they accept the lie, and the first systematic inequality is codified.
Meanwhile, the ideological struggle between Snowball and Napoleon comes to a head over the windmill. Snowball, embodying the intellectual, dedicates himself to education, literacy campaigns, and his ambitious windmill plan.
which promises electricity, labor-saving devices, and a comfortable 3-day work week, the pure utopian vision.
Right. And Napoleon, the cunning one, he scorns all that. He scorns debate and education. What's his counter strategy?
He's playing a long game built on brute force and secrecy.
Exactly. While Snowball is arguing eloquently in public, Napoleon is quietly indoctrinating the 9 newborn puppies he took from their mothers, raising them to be savage, loyal instruments of state terror. He knows that true power lies not in persuasion, but in the monopoly of violence.
The final, decisive conflict occurs during the debate over the windmill.
Snowball delivers this passionate, persuasive speech, and the animals seem ready to vote overwhelmingly for his utopian plan. Napoleon doesn't argue, he just whimpers.
And that's the signal.
That's the signal. The secretly raised dogs, now massive and terrifying, burst into the barn, snarling like wolves. They charge Snowball, driving him off the farm in a violent spectacle. He is hunted, disappears, and is never seen again.
The coup is successful, swift, and absolute. The moment force overcomes idealism.
And the first decree from Napoleon is the abolition of the Democratic Sunday meetings. All decisions are now made exclusively by a committee of pigs, presided over by Napoleon. The new master has cemented his rule through terror.
And this is immediately followed by the second step in the playbook, the seizure of the past.
Squealer's job here is monumental. He has to rewrite history overnight.
And he works tirelessly.
He claims Snowball was never a hero, but a criminal and a traitor who was secretly working with Jones from the very beginning. He insists that Napoleon had only pretended to oppose the windmill as a tactic to expose the criminal Snowball.
In fact, Squealer claims the windmill was Napoleon's brilliant idea all along.
And the animals are shocked. They remember clearly that Snowball was the champion of the windmill, but the menace of the dogs and Squealer's persuasive voice, it forces them to accept the newly manufactured reality.
This marks the full descent into totalitarianism. The farm shifts into a regime of hard labor, shrinking rations, and constant fear.
And the illusion of progress is maintained by the manipulation of facts. Napoleon's regime perfects the use of alternative facts. Squealer constantly reads out long, convoluted lists of statistics, proving with charts that food production is up by 200, 300, even 500%.
He uses numbers to create a reality completely contrary to their lived experience.
Which is that they're literally starving, but the data supports the party, not the truth.
The psychological terror is maintained by making Snowball the perpetual scapegoat.
Every single misfortune, a broken drain, a lost horseshoe, a failed harvest, the collapse of the first windmill in a storm is instantly blamed on Snowball, the phantom enemy, the secret saboteur who creeps back under cover of darkness.
And this constant, invisible threat keeps the animals in a state of perpetual fear.
It diverts attention from the leadership's failures and reinforces the necessity of Napoleon's iron rule for protection against this phantom menace.
This psychological control eventually gives way to open physical terror, the Great Purge.
This is a direct, chilling parallel to Stalin's show trials and purges of the 1930s. Napoleon assembles the animals and, under the menacing glow of the dogs, demands confessions of impossible crimes in league with the invisible Snowball.
And several animals, driven by hysteria and fear, step forward.
They confess to fabricated alliances and sabotage, and they are instantly slaughtered by the dogs at Napoleon's feet. It is a moment of pure state-sanctioned terror, violating the most sacred commandment. No animal shall kill any other animal.
And the linguistic cleanup is immediate, demonstrating the heart of the regime's control.
When the animals, specifically Clover the mare, check the 7 commandments again, they discover the law has been subtly, quietly altered. The 5th commandment now reads, "No animal shall drink alcohol to excess." The 6th, regarding murder, now reads, "No animal shall kill any other animal without cause."
This is gaslighting at its purest.
Exactly. The pigs don't simply violate the law, they edit the law in the dead of night, forcing the animals to doubt their own memories of what the truth was.
The most emotional point of the entire narrative, the ultimate betrayal of the proletariat, centers on Boxer.
Boxer, the loyal cart horse. He's the moral and physical engine of the farm, the dedicated believer, the exploited proletariat whose identity is completely tied up in service and hard work.
His 2 unwavering mottos are, "I will work harder," and "Napoleon is always right."
He pours his entire being into building the windmill, working past the point of exhaustion.
And his loyalty is repaid with utter cynicism.
After he collapses from a lung ailment, unable to work, Squealer announces with this sickening manufactured sympathy that Boxer will be sent to a veterinary hospital in Willingdon.
The animals feel relief for a moment.
Until Benjamin, the cynical, observing donkey who alone retains his literacy, notices the lettering on the side of the approaching van. Alfred Simmons, horse slaughterer and glue boiler.
He was sold to the knacker's yard for profit.
The betrayal is absolute. It is the most devastating critique of the entire system. The pigs sell the most loyal, dedicated creature on the farm for a few shillings.
And Squealer's final lie.
He delivers this magnificent yet utterly false final speech describing Botzer's peaceful death at the hospital, claiming his last breath was a prayer for Napoleon's success. That very night, the pigs hold a loud, drunken party, paid for with the money extracted from Boxer's body.
The system consumes its most devoted servants with zero remorse.
And years pass, and the revolution completes its terrifying inversion.
A new generation is born with no memory of the hopeful rebellion. The farm is technically richer, but only the pigs benefit.
And the core principles of the revolution are inverted in this visually horrific way. The pigs begin walking upright on their hind legs and carrying whips.
And the sheep, the most easily manipulated masses, are re-educated.
They're taught a new, simple mantra to drown out any possible dissent. 4 legs good, 2 legs better.
The final act of linguistic corruption seals the deal, creating the most famous line in the book.
The 7 commandments are entirely wiped away, replaced by a single devastating rule painted on the barn wall. It reads, "All animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others."
This is the apex of linguistic manipulation.
It uses the language of equality to codify and enforce absolute permanent difference in privilege. It allows the ruling class to claim adherence to the ideal of equality while simultaneously institutionalizing vast hierarchy.
And the ultimate horror is that final, iconic scene where the farm finally merges with the enemy it sought to defeat.
Napoleon hosts a delegation of human farmers, former enemies, to celebrate the farm's efficiency. A human farmer, Mr. Pilkington, praises Napoleon for running the most brutally effective farm he has ever seen, specifically noting that the animals do more work and receive less food than any other laborers.
And Napoleon renames the farm back to its original name, Manor Farm.
The revolution is officially, utterly erased.
And as the animals look through the farmhouse window,
they watch the pigs and the men, drinking and arguing, becoming utterly indistinguishable. The text concludes that the creatures outside look from pig to man, and from man to pig, and from pig to man again, but already it was impossible to say which was which.
the oppressors and the liberators have become one and the same.
The unseen enemy was not man, but the corrupting, cyclical nature of power itself.
That detailed walkthrough confirms the meticulous structure of the betrayal. Now let's pivot and analyze the characters themselves. They aren't just characters, are they? They are eternal archetypes that form the roles necessary for any tyrannical system to operate.
Analyzing these archetypes is key to applying Orwell's vision. You have to start with Old Major, the visionary. He's the master of revolutionary rhetoric, providing the ideology and the unifying anthem, the foundation of the revolution.
He's necessary to start the change.
But his death ensures he never witnesses or participates in its corruption, thus preserving the purity of the original ideal.
And the two rival leaders define the critical choice facing any revolution.
You've got Snowball, who represents the intellectual idealist Trotsky, or pure revolutionary fervor. His focus is on persuasion, education, technology, genuine improvement. His fatal, naive flaw was believing that power lay in the ability to debate and convince the people.
He underestimated the need for force.
Whereas Napoleon, the Stalin figure, understood the nature of power implicitly. He relied on silence and terror.
He's the ultimate cunning tyrant.
Uninterested in ideas, education, or debate. His only concern was absolute control. His strategic brilliance was in managing the truth, relying entirely on secrecy, brute force, the dogs, and state terror. He never engaged Snowball on the merits of the windmill.
He just unleashed violence to end the debate forever.
Right.
The character that feels most acutely modern, the one we see in every news cycle, is Squealer. He is the blueprint for political media and public relations.
Squealer is the master manipulator, the original spin doctor. His value to Napoleon is his extraordinary skill in rhetoric, the ability to take a verifiable lie and present it with such persuasive charm that he turns black into white.
So let's focus on his methods. How does Squealer manage the truth that contradicts reality?
He relies on two main methods. First, selective statistics and technical jargon. He uses long, fabricated lists of figures and percentages to prove that the animals are richer and better fed than ever before, despite their visible starvation.
It creates a cognitive dissonance.
The animals are forced to trust the complicated, expert-delivered statistics over the simple, observable reality of their empty stomachs. And second, he relies on the constant repetition of fear, the Jones would come back argument, which just short-circuits all critical thought.
The ultimate tragedy, of course, is Boxer. We need to go deeper into the psychology behind his blind faith.
Boxer is the exploited proletariat, the emotional heart that drives the engine of the totalitarian state. His two mottos are the key to his entire identity. I will work harder, and Napoleon is always right.
So his identity is tied entirely to hard work and absolute loyalty.
He has this genuine, selfless belief in the revolutionary ideal, which makes him the perfect victim. He doesn't question the system because he believes his duty is only to work harder for its success.
And his fate confirms the system's terrifying indifference.
It confirms that regardless of the ideology, whether it's capitalist exploitation or communist revolution, the system will always consume the dedicated worker. Loyalty is replaced by a cold, efficient tyranny that sees every individual not as a comrade, but as a unit of production to be discarded the moment they cease to be profitable.
And you have the enforcers and the masses, the dogs and the sheep.
The dogs are the secret police, the instruments of state terror, indoctrinated from infancy to enforce silence and end all possibility of opposition. They represent the necessary military or enforcement wing of any unchecked government.
And the sheep are crucial.
The sheep are the brainwashed masses. They're easily controlled, unthinking, and their function is vital. To drown out intelligent discussion and debate with simple, repeated slogans, 4 legs good, 2 legs better, illustrating the overwhelming power of mass, unthinking conformity to smother rational dissent.
The characters are clearly eternal archetypes. Now we can finally put all the pieces together and look at the core themes. What are the fundamental questions this book poses, and how do they form this 5-step playbook for control that is still used today?
Well, the overarching realization is the corrupting nature of power itself. The book asks, if we drive out the human oppressor, but the new liberators adopt the same tools of oppression, what have we actually achieved?
The profound discovery is that the problem isn't the specific type of master, but the existence of unchecked power.
And this leads directly to the playbook.
Okay, let's break down the playbook, starting with the systemic process of destroying truth, which Orwell observed first in Spain.
That is step 1. The war on memory, or institutional gaslighting. The goal is systematic revisionism. The pig regime makes Snowball the perpetual, invisible scapegoat for every failure. This achieves 2 things. It prevents the animals from blaming the current leadership, and it establishes a constant, invisible threat that keeps the population in perpetual fear, demanding more protection from the state.
And the physical act of editing the laws, the commandments, is what forces the psychological damage.
That is the core of gaslighting. When the pigs quietly edit the laws changing, no animal shall drink alcohol to excess, and make the animals doubt their own memories of what was true, they weaponize confusion.
Because if you can't trust your memory of the past,
you have no baseline for evaluating the injustice of the present. And this technique is routinely used today when politicians or corporate leaders deny statements they made last week, or when foundational rules are quietly amended to accommodate the crimes of the powerful.
Which brings us to step 2, linguistic corruption and doublethink. Orwell shows how language is weaponized to enforce inequality while simultaneously claiming to uphold equality.
This is the essential psychological barrier. The final commandment is the perfect example. All animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. The structure of that sentence uses the revolutionary promise, all animals are equal, to smuggle in the tyrannical reality. Some animals are more equal.
It's designed to neutralize dissent.
Exactly. If a sheep argues for true equality, the pig can simply nod and say, yes, of course, we adhere to the foundational principle of equality as defined by our singular commandment. It uses the language of the ideal to justify the horror of the reality.
We see this constantly in modern political rhetoric, where concepts like freedom or justice are redefined to mean the opposite of their dictionary definition, all in the service of power.
And that ties right into step 3, the burden of privilege as a sacrifice. This is Squealer's most cynical and enduring tactic. The pigs frame their consumption, their special rations, their special sleeping arrangements, their excessive luxury, not as privilege, but as a burdensome necessity.
They are forced to take these benefits for the greater good.
Precisely. The argument is, without the pigs' superior intellect, without their necessary consumption of milk and apples to keep their brains sharp, the entire enterprise would collapse and Jones would return.
So it's a self-serving necessity that justifies every inequality.
By claiming the powerful must suffer for the benefit of the weak. This tactic is rampant in corporate structures, justifying massive executive bonuses or political regimes claiming austerity is necessary because the elite are working so hard to save the masses.
Step 4. Manufactured scapegoats to prevent internal scrutiny. We talked about Snowball, but how does this mechanism work over the long term?
The scapegoat must be omnipresent and omnipotent, yet invisible and untouchable. Snowball's value is that he can never be caught or questioned, which makes him the perfect vessel for all the system's failures.
So the population is too busy looking for the phantom enemy to realize the problem is the pig standing right in front of them.
Exactly. If the lights go out, it's not due to pig mismanagement. It's Snowball's fault.
Yeah.
If the rations are cut, it's because Snowball is sabotaging the food storage.
And finally, step 5. The consumption of the believer. Boxer's fate.
This is the final step in solidifying tyranny, demonstrating that genuine faith and loyalty are worthless. If the most dedicated, selfless worker is rewarded by being sold for cash, the cynical truth is laid bare. The system does not reward virtue. It rewards efficiency and obedience.
Boxer's betrayal ensures that all future loyalty will be based on fear, not on ideology.
Because the cost of true belief is annihilation.
Though the Orwell delivered this message using a simple, accessible fable, is just as important as the message itself. Let's talk about the craft elements that make this book so devastatingly effective.
His style is what makes the political critique universally digestible. He chose the form of a simple, accessible fable or allegory, which critics often dubbed the brutal fairy story. By using barnyard animals, he bypassed the intellectual and political defenses that a dense political tract would encounter.
So he delivered this profound, dangerous political criticism wrapped in a package that anyone, regardless of education, could understand.
The simplicity forces the moral force of the argument right to the forefront.
And the deliberate use of slogans and anthems is a core technique of propaganda that he captured perfectly.
Oh, it's the mechanism for thought control. Anthems like Beasts of England are designed to ignite fervent collective emotion and unifying ideology. But later, the simple slogans, boxers' mottos, the sheep's chants, they're used not to express an idea, but to prevent thought altogether.
They're just noise.
Short, easily repeated bursts of noise designed to bypass the critical faculty and smother complex thought or meaningful debate. Orwell realized that tyranny thrives on simplicity and repetition.
We have to reiterate the drama of the initial reception, because knowing it was suppressed makes the legacy of the book even more powerful.
Well, the initial rejection was a dramatic proof of the very mechanisms he was describing. Orwell was a man telling a difficult truth at a time when military and political necessity demanded silence. He was censored, actively suppressed by Soviet agents in the publishing industry, and discouraged by his own government.
But its eventual global success confirmed that his warning transcended the historical context of World War II.
The book finally found publication in 1945, and while initially slow, its success just exploded globally. It became an immediate classic because people recognized the pattern. It wasn't just about Stalin, it was a universal warning about the inherent corruption in all unchecked power.
Its continued relevance ensures that the book remains a classic, a guidebook to spotting tyranny in any form. The chilling part about knowing the historical context, Orwell fleeing Stalinists, the WWII censorship, is that it makes the 5-step playbook hit differently when you see those patterns repeating today, whether in government, corporate life, or media.
It connects the abstract ideas of political theory directly to the real violence and betrayal Orwell personally experienced. He wrote this book because his life depended on exposing this lie. And this brings us to the final key takeaways: how you, the listener, can apply this knowledge.
What should we be actively listening for in the modern world? How do we identify Squealer's voice?
You need to listen for that systematic attempt to manage the truth with noise. Ask yourself, is someone presenting selective data, technical jargon, or alternative facts that completely contradict the reality I or my community are experiencing?
If the numbers look too good or too specific.
Scrutinize the source and the methodology. A squealer always speaks in percentages that defy common sense.
We must also vigilantly identify the scapegoat.
Look for step 4 in action. Is there a perpetual, invisible enemy, a phantom snowball, being blamed for every economic, social, or infrastructural failure? A constant scapegoat is used to exhaust the populace and prevent them from looking critically at the current leadership. The enemy is rarely where the powerful tell you it is.
And scrutinize the rules themselves.
Be vigilant for the quiet editing of core principles or laws. Are the fundamental rules of the system, the contract between the governed and the governing, changing in the dark?
When the law changes subtly to accommodate the historical or current crimes of the powerful.
You are watching the commandments on the barn wall being rewritten in real time. Do not let them make you doubt your memory of the original promise.
The final horror, as we discussed, is the realization that the farm is not a distant fictional place.
The patterns of corruption, the betrayal of the idealist, the linguistic corruption, the self-justification of privilege, and the cynical exploitation of the loyal worker. These repeat across all industries, political alignments, and social movements. Orwell gives us the language to describe the pattern, but he also poses the final, painful, personalized challenge that builds on everything we've discussed today.
So if the farm is all around us and you can now spot the tactics of control, the only question left is, are you one of the pigs who exploits the system? Or are you boxer being led with noble intention and blind loyalty to the glue factory?
That leaves you with a deep, personal challenge to choose vigilance over blind obedience.
A profound and necessary thought to leave you with. Thank you for sharing your sources and participating in this deep dive into Animal Farm. We encourage you to reflect on these concepts of gaslighting and linguistic corruption in your daily media consumption. Until next time.